The golden autumn leaves danced outside the windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom mirror, carefully adjusting the delicate sapphire earrings that had once belonged to Princess Diana. Tonight was the royal variety performance, and she could feel the familiar flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. After more than a decade of royal duties, some occasions still made her heart race, not from fear, but from the genuine anticipation of connecting with people through the magic of live entertainment. William emerged from his dressing room, looking distinguished in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo. The years had been kind to him, adding a maturity to his features that somehow made him even more handsome than the young man Catherine had fallen in love with at university. He caught her eye in a mirror and smiled, that same warm smile that had captured her heart all those years ago in St. Andrews. "You look absolutely stunning," he said softly, approaching her from behind and gently placing his hands on her shoulders. The midnight blue gown she wore was a masterpiece of elegant design, flowing gracefully from her shoulders to the floor, with subtle beading that caught the light beautifully. It was sophisticated yet accessible, regal yet relatable. Everything Catherine had become as a member of the royal family. Catherine turned in his arms, reaching up to straighten his bow tie with practiced ease. "Are you ready for tonight?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. William thrived at these events, his natural charisma and genuine interest in people making him perfect for occasions that celebrated British talent and creativity. "Always ready when I'm with you," he replied, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. It was a simple gesture, but one that spoke of the deep partnership they had built together, both in their marriage and in their royal roles. As they made their way downstairs, Catherine's mind wandered to the performers they would meet tonight. The royal variety performance had a long and storied history, dating back over a century, and she never tired of the diversity of acts it showcased. From established stars to emerging talents, from comedy to drama to music, it represented the very best of British entertainment industry. Their private secretary, James, met them in the entrance hall with the evening's schedule and briefing notes. "Your Royal Highnesses," he began with a respectful nod. "The car will arrive in 10 minutes. Tonight's lineup includes some particularly exciting newcomers alongside the established stars. They're the young dancer from Birmingham who overcame significant physical challenges to reach this stage, and a comedy duo from Scotland who've been making waves on social media." Catherine smiled, already looking forward to meeting these performers. One of the aspects she loved most about her role was the opportunity to hear people's stories, to learn about their journeys, and the passion that drove them to pursue their dreams despite obstacles. The drive to the London Coliseum was filled with comfortable conversation about their children, who were safely at home with their trusted nanny. George, Charlotte, and Louis had wanted to stay up to watch the performance on television, and William and Catherine had agreed, knowing how much the children enjoyed seeing their parents on screen, even if they didn't fully understand the significance of these public appearances. "Do you remember our first royal variety performance together?" William asked as they moved through the London traffic. Catherine laughed, recalling how nervous she had been that first time, worried about every gesture being scrutinized, every expression being analyzed by the media and public. "I was terrified I'd trip going up the stairs to the royal box," she admitted. "And you told me that if I fell, you'd fall with me, so we'd look ridiculous together." "Still would," William said with a grin, "though I think you've mastered royal protocol by now." The truth was, Catherine had indeed found her confidence over the years. What had once felt like an overwhelming responsibility now felt like a privilege. She understood the power of her position to shine a light on important causes and talented individuals, and she took that responsibility seriously while never losing sight of the joy these occasions could bring. As their convoy approached the venue, Catherine could see the crowds gathering behind barriers, people of all ages hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal couple. The sight still moved her, the realization that people took time from their evening to come and see them, to be part of this shared experience of celebration. The car came to a smooth stop, and Catherine took a deep breath, centering herself for the evening ahead. William reached over and squeezed her hand gently, a gesture that grounded her and reminded her that whatever challenges the evening might bring, they would face them together. The door opened, and they were greeted by the familiar sounds of camera shutters and enthusiastic cheers from the crowd. William stepped out first, as protocol dictated, then turned to offer his hand to Catherine. She emerged gracefully, her gown flowing behind her like liquid silk, and the crowd's cheers grew even louder. They paused on the red carpet, allowing the photographers to capture their arrival. Catherine had learned over the years to find genuine moments of connection even in these highly choreographed situations. She spotted a young girl in the crowd, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, wearing a small tiara and waving enthusiastically. Catherine caught her eye and gave her a special wave, delighting in the child's excited response. "She reminds me of Charlotte," William murmured as they walked toward the entrance, and Catherine could hear the warmth in his voice. Despite the grandeur and formality of their public roles, family remained at the center of their world. Inside the London Coliseum, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The historic venue, with its ornate decorations and rich red velvet seats, provided the perfect backdrop for an evening celebrating the performing arts. Catherine never failed to be impressed by the theater's beauty and the sense of history it contained. They were escorted to meet the evening's performers backstage, a tradition that Catherine particularly cherished. This was where the real magic happened, where she could connect with the artists as individuals rather than just watching their performances from afar. The first person they met was Sarah, a young dancer from Birmingham who had been born with a rare condition affecting her mobility. Through years of determination and innovative physical therapy, she had developed a unique style of dance that was both beautiful and deeply moving. As she spoke about her journey, Catherine found herself genuinely inspired by the young woman's resilience and creativity. "The most important thing," Sarah explained, her eyes bright with passion, "is that dance gave me a way to express emotions I couldn't put into words. When I'm on stage, my physical limitations disappear. I'm just pure movement and feeling." William asked thoughtful questions about her training and her aspirations for the future, and Catherine could see how much it meant to Sarah to have her story truly heard and understood. This was what made these encounters so meaningful. They weren't just photo opportunities, but real conversations between people who, despite their vastly different circumstances, shared common human experiences of challenge, growth, and the pursuit of dreams. Next, they met the Scottish comedy duo Hamish and Craig, whose online videos had garnered millions of views. What struck Catherine immediately was their authenticity. Despite their success, they remained grounded and genuinely funny without relying on cruelty or negativity for laughs. "We grew up in a small town where entertainment meant creating your own fun," Hamish explained. "We started making each other laugh as kids, and somehow that turned into making other people laugh too. It still doesn't feel quite real." Catherine and William found themselves genuinely laughing at the duo's gentle humor and quick wit. There was something refreshing about their approach to comedy. It was inclusive rather than divisive, bringing people together rather than creating divisions. As they continued meeting performers, Catherine reflected on how each person they encountered had a unique story of passion, perseverance, and creativity. There was the classical violinist who had started learning music to cope with anxiety, the magician who used his performances to raise awareness about mental health, and the singer-songwriter whose lyrics were inspired by her grandmother's stories of wartime Britain. Each conversation reinforced Catherine's belief in the power of the arts to heal, inspire, and unite people across all boundaries. These weren't just entertainers. They were storytellers, dreamers, and healers who used their talents to make the world a little brighter. William seemed equally moved by the encounters. Catherine watched as he listened intently to a young poet whose work focused on environmental themes, asking insightful questions and showing genuine interest in the intersection of art and social consciousness. It was moments like these that reminded her why she had fallen in love with him, his authentic curiosity about people, and his ability to connect with anyone, regardless of their background or circumstances. As they made their way to the royal box for the beginning of the performance, Catherine felt a familiar sense of privilege and responsibility. Tonight, they weren't just audience members. They were representatives of a tradition that celebrated and supported the arts in Britain. Their presence here sent a message about the value of creativity and the importance of nurturing talent at every level. The royal box itself was elegantly appointed, offering an excellent view of the stage while maintaining the appropriate dignity for the occasion. As they settled into their seats, Catherine looked out over the packed theater, seeing faces filled with excitement and anticipation. In the audience were people from all walks of life, united by their appreciation for live performance and their curiosity about the evening's acts. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the theater as the evening's host took the stage. Catherine felt that familiar thrill of anticipation that came with live performance. The knowledge that anything could happen, that magic was about to unfold before their eyes. As the first act began, Catherine found herself completely absorbed in the performance. The opening number was a spectacular dance piece that combined traditional ballet with contemporary movement, telling a story of transformation and hope without a single word. She glanced at William and saw that he too was captivated, his usual reserve forgotten in the face of genuine artistry. Throughout the evening, Catherine found herself experiencing a full range of emotions. She laughed until tears came to her eyes during the comedy segments, felt her heart swell with pride during the patriotic musical numbers, and was moved to genuine tears by a particularly poignant solo performance about loss and healing. Between acts, she and William would exchange quiet comments about the performances, sharing their reactions and observations. These whispered conversations were some of Catherine's favorite moments. Private connections in the midst of a very public evening, reminders of the partnership that sustained them both in their royal duties and their personal lives. As the first half of the show concluded and the intermission began, Catherine reflected on how much she had already experienced in just this first portion of the evening. The talent on display was extraordinary, but more than that, each performance had carried with it a piece of the performer's heart and soul. This was what made live theater so special. It was immediate, intimate, and utterly human despite the grandeur of the setting. During the intermission, they would meet with more performers and dignitaries, but for now, Catherine allowed herself a moment to simply appreciate where she was and what she was witnessing. Surrounded by history, art, and the warmth of William's presence beside her, she felt deeply grateful for the opportunity to support and celebrate the incredible creativity that flourished in their country. The evening was far from over, and Catherine knew that the best was yet to come. As the audience began to return to their seats for the second half, she prepared herself for more magic, more emotion, and more moments that would remind her why events like this were so much more than mere entertainment. They were celebrations of the human spirit itself. The intermission brought a flurry of activity as Catherine and William were escorted to a private reception room behind the royal box. The space was elegantly decorated with photographs from previous royal variety performances, creating a wonderful timeline of British entertainment history. Catherine paused before a photograph from 1963 showing the Beatles performing for Queen Elizabeth II, marveling at how this event had consistently brought together royalty and popular culture across the decades. "Your Royal Highnesses," announced their private secretary, "we have several special guests who would like to meet you this evening." Catherine straightened her posture and smoothed her gown, preparing for what she knew would be a series of meaningful encounters. The first person introduced was Margaret Thompson, a 92-year-old former variety performer who had graced the same stage 60 years earlier. Despite her age, Margaret's eyes sparkled with the unmistakable energy of someone who had spent their life in the spotlight. She wore an elegant black dress adorned with a brooch shaped like a theater mask, a subtle nod to her performing background. "Your Royal Highness," Margaret said with a slight curtsy that spoke of decades of practice, "I remember performing for your grandmother, Her late Majesty, in 1962. I was terrified then, but she had the most wonderful way of putting performers at ease." Catherine was immediately drawn to Margaret's warmth and the stories that seemed to dance behind her eyes. "Please, tell me about that performance. What was it like to be on that stage as a young woman?" Margaret's face lit up as she began to share her memories. "I was 28 and thought I knew everything about performing, but standing on that stage, knowing the Queen was watching, was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I was a singer then, specializing in folk ballads. The song I chose was about a young woman leaving home to find her dreams in the big city. Rather fitting, since I'd done exactly that myself, coming to London from a tiny village in Wales." William leaned in, genuinely interested. "Did you find those dreams you were singing about?" "Oh, Your Royal Highness, I found more than I ever imagined. Not just success, though there was some of that, but a whole community of artists who became my chosen family. The theater world is special that way. We take care of each other, celebrate each other's victories, and help each other through the difficult times." Catherine found herself deeply moved by Margaret's story and the way she spoke about her artistic community. It reminded her of the importance of supporting emerging artists and maintaining the traditions that had nurtured British theater for generations. As their conversation continued, Margaret shared stories of the changing entertainment industry, of how technology had transformed both performance and audience engagement, but how the fundamental human need for storytelling and connection remained constant. She spoke of younger performers she had mentored, of the responsibility she felt to pass on not just technical skills, but the values of dedication, authenticity, and mutual support that had sustained her throughout her career. "The most important thing I learned," Margaret said, her voice growing more serious, "was that every performance is a gift. You're given someone's attention, their time, their emotional energy, and you must honor that. Whether you're performing for 5 people or 5,000, for the Queen or for children at a local school, you give everything you have." Catherine felt a strong connection to Margaret's words. In her own role as a royal, she often reflected on the privilege and responsibility of having people's attention, of being given a platform to make a difference. The parallel between Margaret's approach to performance and her own approach to public service was striking and inspiring. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another special guest, Dr. James Wilson, the director of a charity that used performing arts as therapy for children with trauma. His organization had been selected as one of the beneficiaries of the evening's proceeds, and Catherine had specifically requested to meet with him. "Dr. Wilson," Catherine said warmly, extending her hand, "I've read about your work, and I'm so impressed by what you're accomplishing. Please, tell me more about how you use performance to help children heal." Dr. Wilson, a soft-spoken man in his 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, smiled gratefully. "Your Royal Highness, our work is based on the understanding that trauma often leaves children without words for their experiences. Through drama, music, and movement, we help them find ways to express and process emotions that might otherwise remain trapped inside them." William asked, "What does a typical session look like? How do you create a safe space for children who have experienced such difficult things?" "We start very slowly," Dr. Wilson explained. "Sometimes a child might spend weeks just watching from the corner of the room. We never force participation, but gradually most children begin to engage. They might start by making sound effects for a story or choosing costumes for other children to wear. Small steps that help them regain a sense of agency and creativity." Catherine was fascinated by the approach and asked about specific success stories. Dr. Wilson's face brightened as he shared the story of a 7-year-old girl who had been selectively mute after witnessing domestic violence. Through months of gentle encouragement and drama therapy, She had eventually found her voice by speaking the lines of a brave princess character she had created. The beautiful thing, Dr. Wilson continued, is that once children find their voices through performance, they begin to find them in other areas of their lives as well. We've seen remarkable changes in school performance, social relationships, and overall emotional well-being. The conversation was deeply meaningful for Catherine, who had long been an advocate for children's mental health initiatives. She made mental notes about potential ways the royal family might support Dr. Wilson's work, perhaps through patronage or by raising awareness of the connection between arts and healing. As they continued talking, more guests arrived, including several performers from the evening's show who had specifically requested to meet the royal couple. Among them was Elena Rodriguez, a flamenco dancer whose powerful performance had been one of the evening's highlights. Elena was still in her costume, a stunning red dress that seemed to hold the energy and passion of her dance within its flowing fabric. "Your Royal Highnesses," Elena said with a graceful curtsy, her Spanish accent adding warmth to her words. "I am so honored to meet you. Performing on this stage has been a dream of mine since I was a little girl watching these shows on television in Madrid." Catherine was struck by Elena's poise and the obvious dedication that had brought her to this moment. "Your performance was absolutely breathtaking. How did you come to flamenco? Was it part of your family tradition?" Elena's expression grew more personal as she shared her story. "Actually, no, Your Royal Highness. My family moved to England when I was 8, and I felt very lost, caught between two cultures. I discovered flamenco at a community center in Manchester, and it became my way of staying connected to my heritage while building a new life here. The dance taught me that you can honor your past while creating your future." William was intrigued by the cultural aspect of Elena's journey. "How do you balance preserving the traditional elements of flamenco with making it accessible to modern British audiences?" "That's such a thoughtful question, Your Royal Highness. I believe that tradition is not a museum piece. It must live and breathe and evolve while maintaining its essential spirit. In my performances, I use traditional techniques and rhythms, but I also incorporate themes and movements that speak to contemporary experiences like immigration, identity, and belonging." Catherine found Elena's perspective fascinating, particularly in how it related to her own experience of joining a centuries-old institution while bringing her own background and perspective to the role. The parallels between artistic evolution and institutional adaptation were striking. Their conversation was enriched by Elena's descriptions of the physical and emotional demands of flamenco, the years of training required to master its complex rhythms and movements, and the deep emotional connection required to perform it authentically. She spoke of flamenco as a language of the soul, capable of expressing joy, sorrow, passion, and defiance through movement and music. As the intermission drew to a close, Catherine reflected on the remarkable conversations they had shared in this brief time. Each person they had met had brought a unique perspective on the power of performance to heal, inspire, transform, and connect people across cultural and generational boundaries. The final guest of the intermission was perhaps the most surprising, a 10-year-old boy named Timothy who had submitted a video audition for the show that had gone viral on social media. While he hadn't been selected for the main performance, the producers had invited him to attend as a special guest, and someone had arranged for him to meet the royal couple. Timothy approached with his parents, clearly nervous, but trying to maintain the composure befitting such an important moment. He wore his best suit, slightly too large for his small frame, and carried himself with the serious dignity of a child trying very hard to behave like a grown-up. "Your Royal Highnesses," he said carefully, having obviously practiced a greeting. "I'm Timothy, and I wanted to thank you for encouraging young people like me to pursue our dreams." Catherine immediately knelt down to Timothy's eye level, a gesture that seemed to ease his nervousness considerably. "Timothy, it's wonderful to meet you. I heard about your audition video. You're quite the performer. Tell me, what kind of act did you do?" Timothy's whole demeanor changed as he began talking about his passion. "I do magic tricks, Your Royal Highness, but not just any magic tricks. I create stories with them, like little plays where the magic helps tell the story. My favorite one is about a shy boy who finds a magic coin that gives him the courage to make friends. William smiled warmly at Timothy's description. That sounds like more than just magic. That sounds like you're a storyteller too. Where did you learn to create these story magic combinations? From my grandfather, Timothy replied, his voice growing stronger with confidence. He was a magician too, but he got sick and couldn't perform anymore. He taught me that the best magic isn't about fooling people. It's about giving them hope and wonder. He said that if you can make someone believe in magic for just a moment, you've given them a gift they can carry forever. Catherine felt her heart swell at Timothy's words and the obvious love he had for his grandfather. Your grandfather sounds like a very wise man. Are you going to keep practicing and performing? Oh yes, Your Royal Highness. I want to perform on this stage someday, just like tonight. But first, I want to get good enough to perform for my grandfather one more time before. Timothy's voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. The poignancy of the moment was not lost on either Catherine or William. Here was a child using performance, not just as entertainment, but as a way to connect with a beloved family member facing illness, as a bridge between generations, and a means of expressing love that might be difficult to put into words. William placed a gentle hand on Timothy's shoulder. I think your grandfather must be very proud of you already. The magic you're learning isn't just in your tricks, it's in your heart and the way you want to share joy with others. As Timothy and his parents were escorted back to their seats, Catherine felt a familiar tightness in her throat that often came when she was deeply moved. The encounter had reminded her of her own children and the importance of nurturing their passions and dreams, whatever form they might take. The brief intermission had been filled with so much human connection and inspiration that Catherine almost felt overwhelmed by the richness of the experiences. Each conversation had added another layer to her understanding of why events like the Royal Variety Performance were so important. They weren't just entertainment, but celebrations of human creativity, resilience, and the power of art to heal and transform lives. As they prepared to return to their seats for the second half of the performance, Catherine took William's arm and squeezed it gently. These moments of connection, both with each other and with the remarkable people they had met, were what made their public duties feel like privileges rather than obligations. The lights in the reception room dimmed, signaling that it was time to return to the theater, but the warmth and inspiration from their conversations would remain with them throughout the rest of the evening and long afterward. As Catherine and William returned to the royal box for the second half of the performance, the energy in the London Coliseum felt different, more intimate, more focused. The audience had settled into the rhythm of the evening, and there was a palpable sense of anticipation for what was to come. Catherine noticed how the lighting had been adjusted to create a warmer, more embracing atmosphere that seemed to draw everyone closer together despite the grandeur of the historic venue. The second half opened with a powerful piece that immediately commanded attention, a contemporary dance performance that told the story of British immigration through movement. Dancers representing different cultures and time periods moved across the stage in flowing patterns that spoke of journeys, struggles, and ultimate integration. Catherine found herself completely absorbed in the wordless narrative, thinking of Elena Rodriguez and her own story of finding belonging through performance. The choreography was breathtaking in its complexity and emotional depth. Dancers wore costumes that gradually transformed throughout the piece, symbolizing adaptation and change while maintaining elements of their original cultural identity. Catherine watched as a dancer representing the Windrush generation moved with dignity and grace, her movements echoing both Caribbean rhythms and British formality, creating something entirely new and beautiful. William leaned over during a particularly moving sequence and whispered, "This is extraordinary. Look how they're showing that immigration doesn't mean losing yourself. It means adding to the tapestry." Catherine nodded, struck by how the performance was making a complex social issue accessible and emotionally resonant without being preachy or heavy-handed. As the dance piece concluded to thunderous applause, Catherine reflected on how art had the unique ability to foster empathy and understanding in ways that speeches or statistics never could. The audience had just experienced immigration not as a political issue, but as a human story of courage, adaptation, and contribution. The next act was a complete change of pace, a brilliant comedy sketch performed by the Scottish duo they had met earlier. Hamish and Craig took the stage with infectious energy, and within moments, the entire theater was laughing. Their humor was clever and observational, finding comedy in everyday British experiences that everyone could relate to. Catherine found herself laughing genuinely, not the polite laughter often expected at royal events, but the kind of deep, unguarded laughter that comes from truly excellent comedy. She watched William wipe tears from his eyes during a particularly hilarious bit about trying to assemble furniture with unclear instructions, a situation they had both experienced in their early married life. What impressed Catherine most about the comedy duo was their ability to find humor without cruelty. Their jokes brought people together rather than dividing them, celebrating shared human experiences rather than mocking differences. In a world that often seemed fractured by division and conflict, this kind of unifying humor felt like a gift. During their performance, Hamish and Craig included several gentle references to the royal presence, but in a way that felt inclusive rather than obsequious. When they joked about the pressure of performing for royalty, they somehow managed to make Catherine and William feel like they were part of the joke rather than the target of it, creating a sense of shared experience with the entire audience. Following the comedy came what many considered the evening's most anticipated performance. Sarah, the young dancer from Birmingham whose story had so moved Catherine during their earlier meeting. As the lights dimmed and a single spotlight illuminated the stage, Catherine felt her breath catch in anticipation. Sarah appeared in a flowing white dress that seemed to capture and reflect the stage lighting, making her appear almost ethereal. The music began, a haunting melody that seemed to speak of both struggle and triumph. As Sarah began to move, Catherine realized she was witnessing something truly extraordinary. Sarah's physical limitations, which might have been seen as obstacles in traditional dance, had been transformed into unique expressions of beauty and strength. Her movements were unlike anything Catherine had ever seen, sometimes flowing and graceful, sometimes sharp and defiant, always deeply emotional and authentic. The piece Sarah performed told the story of her own journey, the confusion and frustration of childhood diagnosis, the long process of learning to work with rather than against her body's differences, and finally, the discovery that her unique physical experience gave her a perspective on movement that was entirely her own. Catherine found herself completely absorbed in Sarah's performance, forgetting entirely about royal protocol or public observation. When Sarah executed a particularly challenging sequence that incorporated her mobility aids as part of the choreography, Catherine had to resist the urge to applaud mid-performance. The emotional power of Sarah's dance reached its peak during a sequence that represented her realization that difference didn't mean limitation, it meant possibility. Her movements became more expansive and joyful, and Catherine could see members of the audience wiping away tears. Even the usually composed William appeared deeply moved. As Sarah's performance concluded, the audience erupted in the kind of standing ovation that comes not just from appreciation of skill, but from genuine emotional connection. Catherine rose immediately, her applause enthusiastic and heartfelt. She watched as Sarah curtsied gracefully, her face glowing with the satisfaction of having shared her truth through art. The performance had been a powerful reminder of why representation mattered in the arts. Sarah hadn't succeeded despite her differences. She had succeeded because of them, bringing a perspective and beauty to dance that could come only from her unique experience. Catherine made a mental note to explore ways that royal patronage might support more diverse voices in the performing arts. The evening continued with a series of musical performances that showcased the incredible diversity of British talent. A young classical violinist performed a piece that seemed to capture the very essence of hope, her bow dancing across the strings with precision and passion that belied her youth. Catherine closed her eyes during the most beautiful passages, allowing the music to wash over her completely. Following the classical performance came something entirely different. A group of street musicians from London who had transformed their urban sound into something that worked beautifully in the formal theater setting. Their energy was infectious, and Catherine could see audience members throughout the theater swaying to their rhythms. What struck Catherine most about these musicians was their joy. Despite coming from challenging circumstances, she had read in the program notes that several were formerly homeless. They radiated an authentic happiness that seemed to spread throughout the theater. Their music spoke of resilience, community, and the power of creativity to transform lives. The group's lead singer, a woman in her 30s with an incredibly powerful voice, dedicated their song to everyone who's ever felt invisible. Catherine felt the dedication deeply, thinking of all the people she had met over the years who had felt overlooked or marginalized, and how performances like this could make them feel seen and valued. As the musical segment concluded, Catherine reflected on the incredible range of human experience and talent she had witnessed in just one evening. From Margaret Thompson's stories of traditional variety performance to Sarah's revolutionary approach to dance, from Timothy's hope-filled magic to Elena's cultural bridge building through flamenco, each performer had brought something unique and valuable to the stage. The penultimate performance of the evening was perhaps the most ambitious, a collaborative piece that brought together several of the evening's performers in a celebration of British creativity. Sarah danced while the street musicians provided rhythm. Elena added flamenco flourishes to the movement vocabulary, and even Hamish and Craig contributed comedic interludes that somehow enhanced rather than disrupted the artistic flow. Watching this collaboration unfold, Catherine was struck by how naturally the different artistic forms complemented each other. It was a perfect metaphor for British society itself, diverse elements coming together to create something stronger and more beautiful than any could achieve alone. The collaborative piece built to a crescendo that incorporated the classical violinist's soaring melody with the street musicians' driving rhythms, Sarah's unique movement style with Elena's passionate flamenco, and the comedy duo's timing with the overall theatrical effect. It was controlled chaos that somehow resolved into perfect harmony. As the collaborative piece ended, Catherine realized that the entire evening had been building to this moment, a demonstration that art at its best brings people together, celebrating differences while finding common ground. The audience seemed to sense this too, their applause lasting several minutes. But the evening wasn't over yet. The final performance was to be a surprise guest appearance that hadn't been announced in advance. As the stage lights dimmed once more, Catherine felt a flutter of anticipation. In her years of attending these events, she had learned that the surprises were often the most memorable moments. A single figure walked onto the stage, an elderly man Catherine didn't immediately recognize, but whose presence commanded immediate attention. He moved slowly but with dignity, carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing of someone who had spent decades performing for audiences. As the spotlight illuminated his face, Catherine heard gasps throughout the audience as they recognized Sir David Mitchell, a legendary British performer who hadn't appeared on stage in over 5 years due to health issues. His presence at tonight's performance was clearly unexpected and deeply meaningful. Sir David approached the microphone with the confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times before. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority and warmth that had made him a beloved figure for generations of British audiences. "Ladies and gentlemen, your royal highnesses," he began, his voice still strong despite his years. "I wasn't planning to be here tonight, but sitting in the audience, watching these extraordinary young performers share their gifts, I felt compelled to share something with you." Catherine found herself hanging on every word, sensing that whatever Sir David was about to share would be significant. "I've been performing for over 60 years, he continued, "and I've learned that the greatest performances aren't about the performer at all. They're about the connection between human beings, the sharing of truth and beauty and hope. Tonight, I've witnessed that connection in its purest form." Sir David went on to speak about the evolution of British performance arts, about the way each generation built upon the foundation laid by previous generations while adding their own unique voice. He spoke about responsibility, the responsibility of established performers to mentor newcomers, of audiences to support diverse voices, and of society to value and protect the arts. "The young people you've seen tonight aren't just entertainers," Sir David said, his voice growing stronger with passion. "They're healers, teachers, bridge builders, and hope givers. They remind us of our shared humanity and our capacity for beauty, even in difficult times." As Sir David concluded his impromptu speech, Catherine felt deeply moved not just by his words, but by the generosity of spirit that had brought him to the stage despite his health challenges. It was a reminder of the dedication and love that sustained the performing arts community across generations. The evening was drawing to a close, but Catherine knew that the impact of what she had witnessed would stay with her for a long time. As the full company of performers took their final bows together, she applauded with genuine enthusiasm, feeling privileged to have been part of such an extraordinary celebration of human creativity and resilience. As the curtain fell on the main performance and the audience began to disperse, Catherine and William were escorted backstage for what was traditionally one of the most meaningful parts of the evening, the opportunity to personally thank and congratulate the performers. The backstage area was buzzing with energy, a controlled chaos of costume changes, makeup removal, and the general excitement that follows a successful performance. Catherine felt a genuine sense of anticipation as they made their way through the corridors. These backstage encounters were often where the real magic happened, where the formal distance of performance gave way to authentic human connection. She had learned over the years that performers, still glowing with the adrenaline of live performance, often shared insights and emotions that revealed the true heart of their artistic journey. The first performer they encountered was Sarah, the young dancer whose performance had so powerfully moved the entire audience. She was still in her flowing white dress, though now she sat in a chair, clearly exhausted from the physical demands of her routine. Her face lit up when she saw Catherine and William approaching. "Your Royal Highnesses," Sarah said, attempting to rise, but Catherine gently gestured for her to remain seated. "Please, don't get up," Catherine said warmly, kneeling down beside Sarah's chair. "That was absolutely extraordinary. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like what you created out there. How are you feeling?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears of joy and exhaustion. "I feel like I've just shared the most important part of myself with the world, Your Royal Highness. For so long, I thought my differences made me less capable. Tonight, I realized they make me more authentic." William, who had been quietly observing the exchange, leaned forward with genuine interest. "Your performance was incredibly moving, but more than that, it was revolutionary. You've redefined what dance can be, what beauty can look like. That takes tremendous courage." "Thank you, Your Royal Highness," Sarah replied, her voice growing stronger. "I kept thinking during my performance about all the young people watching at home who might feel different or limited. I wanted them to see that being different isn't a barrier to achieving your dreams. It might actually be the key to achieving something no one else could." Catherine felt a deep resonance with Sarah's words. In her own journey from a middle-class background to royal life, she had often felt different, unsure whether she belonged in such rarefied circles. Sarah's message about embracing difference as strength rather than limitation felt personally meaningful. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Elena Rodriguez, the flamenco dancer, who approached with the graceful energy that had characterized her performance. She had changed from her red performance dress into a simple black outfit, but Her hair still held the dramatic styling of her stage appearance. "Your Royal Highnesses," Elena said with a warm smile, "I wanted to thank you again for your support of the arts. Meeting you earlier gave me such confidence for my performance." Catherine stood to greet Elena properly. "Your performance was absolutely breathtaking. The passion and precision were remarkable, but what struck me most was how you made flamenco feel both traditional and completely contemporary." Elena's face brightened with pride. "That means everything to me, Your Royal Highness. Flamenco is a living art form, and I believe tradition serves us best when it grows and adapts while maintaining its essential spirit. Tonight felt like a perfect example of that, honoring the past while speaking to the present." William asked about Elena's creative process, and she explained how she had spent months developing the choreography that had graced the evening's stage. "I wanted to tell the story of cultural integration without losing cultural identity," she explained. "The challenge was creating movements that honored both my Spanish heritage and my British experience." As Elena spoke about her creative journey, Catherine found herself thinking about her own process of cultural integration within the royal family. While the circumstances were obviously very different, there were parallels in the challenge of honoring tradition while bringing one's authentic self to new contexts. Their conversation with Elena was joined by the Scottish comedy duo Hamish and Craig, who approached with the easy camaraderie that had made their performance so enjoyable. They had changed out of their performance outfits into casual clothes, but their natural warmth and humor remained evident. "Your Royal Highnesses," Hamish began with a grin. "We hope our jokes weren't too cheeky for a royal audience." Catherine laughed genuinely. "Not at all. Your comedy was wonderful because it brought everyone together. We were all laughing at the same things, sharing the same experiences. That's a real gift." Craig nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly what we aim for, Your Royal Highness. We believe humor should build bridges, not walls. Growing up in Scotland, we learned that the best comedy helps people see their shared humanity." William was interested in their creative partnership and asked about how they developed their material. The duo explained their collaborative process, how they tested jokes in small venues before bringing them to larger stages, and how they constantly refined their approach based on audience response. "The thing about comedy," Hamish explained, "is that it's immediate feedback. You know right away whether something works or not. It keeps you honest as a performer. You can't fake your way through it." Catherine appreciated this insight into the vulnerability required for live performance. Comedy, she realized, might be one of the most exposed art forms, requiring performers to put themselves completely at the mercy of audience reaction. As they continued their backstage rounds, Catherine and William encountered Dr. James Wilson, the director of the arts therapy charity they had met during intermission. He was speaking with several of the evening's performers about potential collaborations, and his face lit up when he saw the royal couple approaching. "Your Royal Highnesses, Dr. Wilson said, this evening has been extraordinary for our organization. Several performers have already expressed interest in participating in our programs. The power of tonight's performances to heal and inspire is exactly what we try to harness in our work with traumatized children." Catherine was delighted by this development. "That's wonderful news. The connection between performance and healing has been such a theme tonight. It seems like a natural collaboration." Sarah, who had been listening to the conversation, suddenly spoke up with excitement. "Dr. Wilson, I would love to work with your organization. My own journey with physical differences has taught me so much about resilience and self-acceptance. I like to share that with young people who are struggling." Elena nodded enthusiastically. "And flamenco is traditionally used as a form of emotional expression. In Spain, we have programs that use dance to help people process difficult emotions. I would be honored to contribute to similar work here." William watched this spontaneous collaboration forming with obvious satisfaction. This is exactly what events like tonight are meant to accomplish. Not just entertainment, but genuine connections that create lasting positive impact. Dr. Wilson was clearly moved by the performers' enthusiasm. This is beyond what I had hoped for. With artists of your caliber involved, we could reach so many more children and families who need support. As the conversation continued, Catherine reflected on how the evening was creating ripple effects that would extend far beyond the performance itself. The connections being formed in this backstage setting would potentially impact countless lives in the months and years to come. Their next encounter was with the street musicians who had brought such infectious energy to the second half of the performance. The group was gathered around their lead singer, Maria, who was carefully packing her equipment while discussing the evening with her bandmates. "Maria," Catherine said as they approached, "your performance was incredibly powerful. The joy you brought to that stage was absolutely infectious." Maria looked up with surprise and delight. "Your Royal Highness, thank you so much. Honestly, I still can't believe we performed on the same stage where so many legends have performed. It feels like a dream." William asked about the group's background and their journey to tonight's performance. Maria explained how they had started as street performers out of necessity, but had discovered that music was more than just a way to earn money. It was a way to build community and spread hope. "When you're performing on the street," Maria explained, "you learn that music is a universal language. People from all backgrounds, all circumstances would stop and listen. Sometimes they'd start singing along or dancing, and suddenly strangers were connected through song." Catherine was fascinated by this description of music as a community-building force. "Tonight you brought that same energy to a much more formal setting, but it felt just as authentic and connecting." "That was our goal, Your Royal Highness," one of the other musicians chimed in. "We didn't want to lose what made our music special just because we were on a bigger stage." The setting changed, but the heart remained the same. The conversation with the street musicians led naturally to discussions about supporting emerging artists and providing pathways for talented performers from diverse backgrounds. Maria mentioned several young musicians in their community who had tremendous potential but lacked access to traditional training and opportunities. Catherine made mental notes about potential ways the Royal Foundation might support such emerging talent. The conversation reinforced her belief that artistic excellence could emerge from any background, and that creating accessible pathways to the arts was crucial for maintaining British cultural vitality. As they continued their backstage journey, Catherine and William encountered Sir David Mitchell, the legendary performer whose surprise appearance had provided such a moving conclusion to the evening. Despite his age and health challenges, Sir David was still energetically discussing the evening's performances with other artists, his love for the craft evident in every word. "Your Royal Highnesses," Sir David said as they approached, "what an evening this has been. I came as a member of the audience, but I couldn't resist sharing the stage one more time with such extraordinary talent." Catherine was moved by Sir David's dedication. "Your appearance was such a gift to everyone present. The wisdom you shared about the arts and their importance to society was profound." "After 60 years in this business," Sir David replied, "I've learned that the arts aren't a luxury, they're a necessity. They help us understand ourselves and each other, they preserve our cultural memory, and they give us hope for the future." Tonight's performers embody all of that. William asked Sir David about changes he had witnessed in the entertainment industry over his long career. The veteran performer spoke thoughtfully about technological advances, changing audience expectations, and evolving social consciousness within the arts community. "The most important change I've seen," Sir David reflected, "is the growing understanding that diverse voices make the arts stronger, not weaker. The barriers that once limited who could participate in professional performance are gradually falling, and the result is a richness of perspective that makes British arts more vital than ever." Catherine found Sir David's perspective particularly meaningful. His endorsement of diversity and inclusion in the arts carried the weight of decades of experience and success, lending powerful support to emerging voices like Sarah and Maria. Their conversation with Sir David was joined by Timothy, the young magician they had met during intermission. who had been watching the backstage interactions with wide-eyed fascination. His parents stood nearby, clearly overwhelmed by the evening's experiences. "Timothy," Catherine said warmly, "how are you enjoying your special evening backstage?" Timothy's eyes were bright with excitement. "Your Royal Highness, this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. Everyone has been so kind, and I've learned so much about performance just by watching and listening." Sir David immediately took interest in the young magician. "A fellow performer. Timothy, isn't it? I hear you're quite the storyteller as well as magician. That's a powerful combination." As Timothy began shyly describing his story magic performances to Sir David, Catherine watched an impromptu mentorship beginning to form. The legendary performer was giving the child his full attention, asking thoughtful questions and offering gentle encouragement. "The most important thing to remember, young man," Sir David told Timothy, "is that the real magic isn't in the tricks themselves, it's in the connection you create with your audience. Everything else is just technique." Catherine felt her heart swell watching this intergenerational exchange. Here was the arts community's tradition of passing knowledge and wisdom from established artists to newcomers playing out in real time, a reminder of the continuity and mutual support that sustained creative communities across time. As the evening's backstage encounters began to wind down, Catherine reflected on the extraordinary human connections she had witnessed and participated in. Each conversation had revealed new layers of meaning to the evening's performances and had reinforced her understanding of the arts as far more than entertainment. They were vehicles for healing, community building, cultural preservation, and social progress. The formal conclusion of the backstage meetings was approaching, but Catherine knew that the relationships and collaborations that had begun tonight would continue long after the curtain fell, creating lasting impacts that would ripple through communities across Britain. The final formal photographs backstage had been taken. The last conversations with performers concluded, and Catherine and William found themselves walking through the quiet corridors of the London Coliseum toward their waiting car. The building, which had been alive with energy and excitement just an hour earlier, now held the peaceful silence that settles over theaters after performances end. Yet Catherine felt that the evening's impact was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. As they walked, Catherine reflected on the profound human connections she had witnessed and experienced throughout the night. Each performer they had met had shared not just their artistic gifts, but pieces of their personal journey, their struggles, their hopes, and their understanding of how art could transform both performer and audience. The evening had been a masterclass in the power of authentic storytelling and genuine human connection. "What struck you most about tonight?" William asked as they reached the stage door, his voice thoughtful and reflective. Catherine paused, considering the question carefully. "I think what moved me most was seeing how each performer used their art to build bridges between cultures, between generations, between different abilities, between performers and audience. Sarah turning her physical differences into a unique form of beauty. Elena blending her Spanish heritage with her British experience. Maria creating community through music. They weren't just performing. They were healing and connecting." William nodded, his expression serious. And the way they all seemed to understand that their gifts came with responsibility. Not just to entertain, but to inspire, to represent, to give voice to experiences that might otherwise go unheard. As they stepped outside, they were greeted by a small group of people who had waited despite the late hour, hoping to catch a final glimpse of the royal couple. Catherine was struck by the diversity of faces in the crowd, young and old, representing various ethnic backgrounds and walks of life, all united by their shared appreciation for the evening's celebration of British artistic talent. A young woman in the crowd called out, "Thank you for supporting the arts, Your Royal Highnesses." Catherine turned toward the voice and smiled warmly, raising her hand in acknowledgement. The simple gesture seemed to delight the crowd, and she could hear excited murmurs of appreciation. During the drive back to Kensington Palace, Catherine and William continued processing the evening's experiences. The car's interior provided a private space for them to share their more personal reactions to what they had witnessed and participated in. "I keep thinking about Timothy," Catherine said, gazing out at the London streets passing by. That moment when Sir David took him under his wing, the way he listened to Timothy's dreams with such genuine interest. It reminded me of how important it is to nurture young talent, not just with resources, but with attention and respect. "That was beautiful to watch," William agreed. "And it happened so naturally, without any formal arrangement or official program. Just one generation recognizing potential in the next and choosing to encourage it." Catherine smiled at the memory. "I've been thinking we should explore more ways to connect established artists with emerging talent through our foundation work. Not just funding, but genuine mentorship opportunities." The conversation turned to Dr. Wilson's charity and the spontaneous collaborations that had begun forming backstage. Catherine was particularly excited about the potential for several of the evening's performers to become involved in arts therapy programs for traumatized children. When Sarah offered to work with children facing physical challenges, and Elena wanted to use flamenco for emotional healing, Catherine reflected, "It showed me something important about artistic integrity. Their success hasn't separated them from their communities. It's connected them more deeply." William had been equally impressed by the performers' social consciousness. It suggests that real artistic excellence includes an understanding of art's power to heal and transform lives. They've achieved success, but they haven't forgotten their responsibility to others. As their car turned into the gates of Kensington Palace, Catherine felt a familiar sense of transition from public role back to private life. Yet tonight felt different somehow. The experiences of the evening had been so meaningful that the usual clear boundary between public duty and personal fulfillment seemed less distinct. "I want to make sure we follow through on the connections that were made tonight," Catherine said as they approached the palace entrance. "This can't just be a lovely evening that we remember fondly. It needs to become something that creates lasting positive change." William squeezed her hand gently. "Absolutely. I'll speak with our staff tomorrow about developing concrete ways to support the collaborative projects that began tonight." Inside the palace, they were greeted by their personal staff, who helped them transition from the formal demands of the evening back to the comfort of home. Catherine's ladies-in-waiting carefully hung her gown while she changed into comfortable clothes, but her mind remained focused on the evening's experiences rather than on the practical details of royal protocol. As they made their way to their private sitting room, Catherine felt drawn to check on their children, even though it was well past their bedtime. She found George, Charlotte, and Louis all fast asleep, but she spent a few minutes in each of their rooms, watching them sleep peacefully and thinking about the world they were growing up in. Standing in Charlotte's room, Catherine reflected on the young women they had encountered that evening. Sarah, with her revolutionary approach to dance, Elena with her bridge building through flamenco, Maria with her community creating music. She hoped Charlotte would grow up in a world where diverse forms of excellence were celebrated and where young women felt empowered to express themselves authentically regardless of their background or circumstances. In George's room, she thought about Timothy and his story magic, about the young classical violinist, about the street musicians who had turned necessity into art. She wanted George to understand that leadership meant supporting and celebrating the gifts of others, creating opportunities for talent to flourish regardless of its source. And in Louis's room, she simply felt grateful for the privilege of raising children in a world where art and beauty and human connection remained possible despite all the challenges and divisions that seemed to dominate so much of public discourse. Returning to the sitting room, Catherine found William reviewing notes from the evening on his tablet, already beginning the process of translating the night's inspiration into concrete action. This was one of the things she most admired about him, his ability to move seamlessly from experiencing meaningful moments to creating practical plans for extending their impact. "I've been thinking about Margaret Thompson," William said as Catherine settled beside him on the sofa. "Her perspective on the continuity of British entertainment, the way each generation builds on what came before while adding something new. There's something important there about honoring tradition while embracing change. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. It applies to our role too, doesn't it? We're part of an ancient institution, but we have to find ways to make it relevant and meaningful for contemporary society. Tonight showed me that tradition doesn't have to be a limitation. It can be a foundation for innovation. They spent the next hour discussing specific ideas for supporting the arts through their royal platform. Catherine was particularly interested in developing programs that would provide mentorship opportunities for young artists, while William was focused on supporting organizations that used arts for social healing and community building. What if we created a fellowship program, Catherine suggested, that paired established artists with emerging talent, not just in similar disciplines, but across art forms? Imagine Timothy learning from Sir David, or Sarah working with the street musicians to explore movement and rhythm. William's eyes lit up with interest. Cross-pollination between art forms and generations that could create really innovative work while preserving and passing on traditional skills and values. As the evening wound down, Catherine found herself feeling deeply satisfied with both the immediate experience of the Royal Variety performance and the potential for future impact it had created. The combination of beautiful art, meaningful human connections, and concrete opportunities for positive change had made it one of the most fulfilling royal engagements she could remember. You know, she said to William as they prepared for bed, I think tonight reminded me why I fell in love with this role. It's not about the glamour or the formal recognition. It's about being able to support and celebrate the best of human creativity and compassion. William smiled at her reflection. The artists we met tonight were doing their royal duties too, in a way. They were serving their communities through their gifts, using their talents to heal and inspire and connect people. We're all in service, just in different ways. As Catherine removed her jewelry and prepared for sleep, she thought about the circular nature of the evening's impact. The royal couple's presence had provided a platform for artists to share their work with a broader audience, but the artists had given them something equally valuable: renewed understanding of art's power to transform lives and communities. Before turning off the lights, Catherine made one final note in her personal journal about following up on the evening's conversations and commitments. She wanted to ensure that the momentum created tonight would translate into sustained support for the artists and organizations they had encountered. As she finally settled into sleep, Catherine's mind was filled with images from the evening: Sarah's revolutionary dance movements, Elena's passionate flamenco, the street musicians' infectious joy, Timothy's hopeful magic, Sir David's generous wisdom. Each memory reinforced her conviction that supporting the arts wasn't just a nice addition to royal duties. It was essential to creating a society where human creativity and connection could flourish. The Royal Variety performance had concluded, but its real impact was just beginning. In the days and weeks to come, the connections made that evening would develop into concrete programs and lasting relationships. Young artists would find mentors, therapeutic programs would gain new resources and participants, and the British arts community would be strengthened by the networks of support and collaboration that had begun forming in the magical atmosphere of a single extraordinary evening. For Catherine and William, the night had been a reminder of why their public service mattered and how it could create ripples of positive change that extended far beyond any single event. They had witnessed the best of British creativity and compassion, and they had gained renewed inspiration for their own roles in supporting and celebrating the human spirit's endless capacity for beauty, healing, and hope.